Hi everyone, and welcome to the Support Department and Joint Cost Allocation in-class examples. For this problem set, we're going to calculate and allocate support department costs, and we're going to use the reciprocal services method. So let's start with the problem set. The company is Becker Tabletops, and they have two support departments. They've got a janitorial and a cafeteria department. They also have two production departments, and that is cutting and assembly. So we're going to walk through a couple of tables that'll give us the relevant data. So looking down here, our janitorial department chooses to allocate costs based on square footage to be serviced. The cafeteria department chooses to allocate their costs based on the number of employees in each of the departments. So we've been given some information here about the company. The janitorial department incurred $310 in cost this period. The cafeteria department had $169, cutting department $1.5 million, and the assembly department had $680. So we have a total cost for this reporting period of $2.6 million. Now remember, the janitorial department, their cost driver is the square footage that they have to clean. So their total square footage is 10,050, and you can see how that square footage is divided amongst the four different departments. The company at this particular location also has 53 employees, and again, you can see how those employees are aligned to the different departments. So now we have to determine how are we going to allocate these costs from the janitorial and the cafeteria department to all four departments in a way that makes sense. So our first step is that we have to determine allocation percentages. And we have a row here to determine our janitorial department allocation percentages and our cafeteria department allocation percentages. So we'll start up here with the janitorial department. And what I want to do is I want to find out how much space does the janitorial department take up, and what is that percentage when we look at it from the total, which is the 10,050. So I'm going to take the 50 square feet and I'm going to divide it by the 1050. I'm going to do the same thing for the cafeteria department, for the cutting department, and for the assembly department. All right, and so we've begun to create our allocation percentages, but we have a column over here, and this column is really our excuse me, our validation, our data validation column. We want to make sure that as we walk through these allocations, that we're not over allocating, that we're not under allocating. And so for this particular one, we just want to make sure that we have 100% of the allocation. And we do. I'm going to go ahead and drag this down, and we're going to do the same thing for the cafeteria department. I'm going to take my 10 employees in the janitorial department, and I'm going to divide it by the total amount. Again, we'll do this all the way across. All right, and we have 100%. Perfect. So now we have our percentages. The next step is to actually allocate these percentages across all of the departments. So let's start with our data validation column. I, again, just want to make sure that everything that we put in here checks back to the original amount. So let's start with the original cost. I'm going to just reach up here and reference this cell. And so that we can speed this up a little bit, I'm just going to drag it across. And we can tell here we've got our 2.663, and that was the information that we were given in the very beginning. All right, now it's time that we need to allocate these costs across the different departments. So let's start with the janitorial department. I'm going to take my 0.5% and I'm going to multiply it by the janitorial department, the total cost for the janitorial department. I'm going to do this for the cafeteria, but remember, it's all about the janitorial department right now. All right, and we can do our data validation. There's 310 here, and there's 310 here. Let's do the same thing for the cafeteria. Almost there. Whoop, almost picked up the wrong one. All right, and we can do our data validation. That's 169, and that equals exactly what we have in our cafeteria department. Now we need to subtract out the costs that we've allocated to the other departments. So the janitorial department has allocated costs to the cafeteria department, cutting department, and the assembly. You'll notice that this is a positive number. You don't have to make yours positive unless if you're in Cengage and it requires you to represent it as a negative, then you'll need to do that. But when you're creating your own allocation workbooks, you can have either a positive or a negative. You just need to make sure that your formula captures this as a subtraction or a less so that your answer comes out correctly. All right, now we need to capture the cafeteria costs. So the cafeteria allocated costs to the janitorial department, the cutting department, and the assembly department. All right. Now we should be able to calculate our total support costs by department. So I'm going to take the original cost, I'm going to add in the janitorial cost, the cafeteria cost, and then I'm going to subtract out the cost that was allocated to other departments. All right, and again, just to make this a little faster, I'm going to drag this over. Okay, so we're going to take a pause for one moment and look at what we've got here. So we've done our data validation all throughout this problem set, and I want to draw your attention to the $2.6 million. It's 2.67. Now, we know that we did not incur $2.67 million. It's really only supposed to be the 2.66. So this is where we want to pause, and we want to make sure that we haven't over allocated anything. So let's go over to the janitorial department and specifically this column. Let me highlight it. And this one we're going to talk about as well. So the janitorial costs, all of the costs are here. We've allocated costs to cafeteria, cutting, and assembly, but we really should not have allocated any additional cost to us because that amount of money is actually captured in the 310. So let's go ahead and delete that. And you can see here's another data validation that you can do. I'm just going to highlight this one and this. So now these two columns match, right? Because we needed to subtract out the costs that were allocated to others. And so those numbers check. So for the cafeteria, we want to do the same thing. Remember, this 9.5 thousand is already captured in the 169. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete this. And we see our 159,443. And that checks over here. So now we can go back to our data validation and we see that it's 2.6, which equals our starting point up here. So this is going to be the total support costs by department. The janitorial department actually started out with 310. After allocating all of these costs to other departments, the expenses that they will report is only $33,000. For the cafeteria, they started out with 169, because they do have a pretty big footprint up here. You can see 5,000 square feet. They did take on a lot of the janitorial costs. So their cost really didn't decrease, but these are the expenses that they will report for this particular reporting period. The cutting department, they initially reported 1.5, but because of the allocations from janitorial and cafeteria, they're now reporting 1.6. And the assembly department started with 680, and now they are reporting 835. So thank you so much for joining me. This is the full reciprocal services method for cost allocation. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video.